Thanks, excuse me. Hi, it's Leif Petersen here. I'm from the economic backwater of Cape Town, the Sustainable Livelihoods Foundation, and we're a non-profit company, and we collaborated with Good Governance Africa specifically on this piece of work to understand more about the dynamics of the informal economy of self-help in the Mbizana area. And it's interesting what Lukona was saying, that the dams in Kantola are full, but the pumps don't work. Cape Town has the opposite problem, the pumps work fine, but there's no water. So it's very interesting to see how the dynamics of South Africa kind of play out in different ways in different parts of the country. In some cases, regardless of how your governance may or may not be working anyway. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about informality as the safety net. And I think one of the things that was striking, and a lot of our work in the Sustainable Livelihoods Foundation, is trying to understand the role of the informal economy and what it does to help bolster people's livelihoods, whether it's about kind of like lowering or reducing people's the effect of poverty on people's livelihoods, or whether it's entrepreneurship, or whether it's a combination of a bit of the kind of multiple income streams that a lot of households have within the township context. So our work has primarily been urban, and we've worked across South Africa doing various kind of informal economy studies and censuses to understand the kind of the scope and scale of informal economy, entrepreneurship and activity. So going to Mbizana was a very interesting experience for us, because it's probably the first time we'd really seen the role of the informal economy as a safety net. And this morning I'm going to talk to you about some of the findings of the things that we learned through the process of our work. And it's a chapter that's in the Good Governance Africa in Fact journal, and it talks specifically, page 48, which is the anatomy of a South African municipality. And a lot of the data I'm talking about here you're going to see within that chapter. So, moving right along. So the background, informal micro-enterprise is just a little bit of kind of theoretical nonsense. The informal economy refers to the realm of all the individual economic activities that are unregulated and non-formalized. These are the activities that are not taxed and they're not registered with government. So pretty much most of the people in this room, you are part of the formal economy. We're talking about businesses that fall outside of the realm in which we're operating. And this economy comprises of self-employed traders, unregulated workers and businesses that provide people with a livelihood and an opportunity to acquire an income. But what we see in South Africa is most informal businesses are very small, operate from people's homes, rudimentary structures in public places, which capitalise on pedestrian traffic in places such as street pavements and near taxi ranks. We also see a lot of large informal businesses as well, but in the context of what we're looking at today, we're looking very much micro-enterprises and survivalist activities. We're also seeing in South Africa a very interesting trend of formal businesses starting to behave more and more informally. So the context of the informal economy is very relevant to all of us in this country, particularly as a kind of emerging economy. So studies on the characteristics of informal economy trading have shown that most actors in the informal economy are not really entrepreneurs, but should be better understood as self-employed survivalists. And their earnings from engagement in informal trade typically only one of the income streams that they will have within their households. So commonly people will have a state support grant of some sort, be it a pension or a disability grant or even a child support grant. There might be other members in the household who have a formal sector job, be it full-time or part-time, and then you'll have an informal sector business which will operate from home or on the street, which is kind of supplementing the broader household income. And but we do see, particularly at the survivalist level, a lot of survivalists remain locked within the informal economy for long periods. I think it's important we don't try and glorify something that is not there. I think a lot of the informal economy and informal economy entrepreneurship is about the bottom of the pyramid, and it is tough. It's really tough. But why should the informal economy matter? I think firstly, poor policy contributes to informalisation. I think the state has a very unusual and possibly incorrect approach into how it sees informal business, and that there are real issues around how we conceptualise what is a business in South Africa. We're very caught in a mindset that formal is good and informal is bad. And in many respects, I think we have to think about our policy when it comes to informalisation. The informal economy presents both a safety net for the poor, but it also presents more opportunity than commonly thought. One of the things that's striking, as you'll learn through the Mbizana findings, is the importance of the informal economy in bolstering household kind of income and normal livelihoods. And specific sectors such as shebeens, spasas, hair care, childcare, street trade, traditional healers, takeaways, have significant sustainability and potential for investment, the informal economy can provide a critical vehicle for sponsoring entrepreneurship, sponsoring growth, and helping maintain livelihoods, if policymakers make the right approaches towards it, and if we make the right kind of investments into those businesses. So, in our case, in the case of Mbizana, okay, we wanted to understand what is the socio-economic situation in which the broader community kind of exists, and within the local kind of like township context. So as Lukona is talking about kind of very much the socio-economics of what's going on within that community, what is it that people in the community, looking at the circumstances that Lukona is describing, what is it that people are doing for themselves that is kind of like irrelevant to what policymakers are thinking or doing? So what is the nature of self-help? And what role, positive or negative, does local government within the Mbizana Municipality play in those enterprises? So in general, look, the Eastern Cape is known to be the economically poorest province in South Africa. A large part of its population is living within rural conditions, often isolated from access to basic services. Mbizana consists of a largely rural area with small concentration of people in the settlement, which is the town of Mbizana, and then a lot of people kind of spread out across the vicinity, which is why we use the transect approach. And whilst there are several shops and workplaces around the central intersection within town, most of the businesses here could be seen as informal economic activities. So when you go into the town of Mbizana, you see businesses, you see Nando's, you see the engine garage, you see the ShopRite, but at the same time, at the front of all those enterprises, you see literally hundreds of informal traders selling plasticware, fruit and vegetables, spaza shops, groceries, you name it. There's a kind of sprawl of informality which kind of almost clouds the formal businesses within the Mbizana town. So our methodology was, of course, some background research and some risk assessment to understand kind of what is it that we're going to be looking at, and then with my colleagues on bicycles, in cars, and on foot, we basically conducted a transect of 34 kilometres. We basically, from Mbizana through to Nkantolo, okay, the researchers recorded every single identified business that we could see. So whether it was people who were trading in Shebeen with a sign saying so-and-so's tavern, whether it was a spaza shop, whether it was a street trader, whether it was like an informal kind of subsistence agricultural business. We took GPSs with us, we waypointed all of those enterprises, and we tried to seek out the owners of those enterprises to discuss with them kind of a little bit about how their businesses were doing. So where we could, we did in-depth interviews with all of the individuals who were running those enterprises. So collectively, the scope and scale of the activity, we found 328 economic activities identified by the research within the 34-kilometre transect. So it's effectively 10 enterprises every kilometre if you were to space them out equally. But as you'll learn, they're not equally spaced out at all. The great majority was subsistence agriculture. More than 200 separate smallholder farmer activities were identified. And these range between sheep farming, cattle farming, people growing millies, green leafy vegetables in some cases as well. So a reasonable diversity, but very much smallholder activities. The remainder, which in many respects makes up a lot of the focus of this analysis, because the entrepreneurs were easy to find and these were kind of actively engaged businesses, were cash-based micro-enterprises, including retail grocery outlets such as spaza shops, street traders and liquor outlets. And we categorised all of these businesses into 36 separate categories to make a little bit of sense of it all, so that we could produce a map that looks a bit like this. So this is the town of Mbizana. This is the locality in the Eastern Cape. So KwaZulu-Natal is literally to the north. We're at the very, very top now of the Eastern Cape. The town of Mbizana here. The R61 road kind of runs along here and then peels off further down that way, and then this road takes you up to Nkantolo. So we're literally stretching from what is relatively urbanised through to what is quite deeply rural. And so the strategy was, we literally, by moving along that road on a kind of like a day-to-day basis, we counted every enterprise we could find. And of course the number one thing we found was crops. Okay, people growing millies and vegetables, followed up by livestock. So collectively more than 200 subsistence agriculture activities. 46 street traders, 18 spaza shops, 11 shops or supermarkets. So these are like general dealers or bigger enterprises that kind of one would consider to be more substantive than a spaza shop. A tuck shop, which is conversely smaller than a spaza shop. We have very clear definitions of what these enterprises look like. Taverns, which are technically licensed liquor outlets, as opposed to shebeens, which are unlicensed liquor outlets, which are also on the list. And then there's a number of kind of small numbers of other things: panel beaters, a tombstone manufacturer, a butcher, place of worship. Okay, all of these kind of enterprises, and we include churches as businesses because they're a critical business activity within the township context as well. But you can see what's quite interesting is a lot of clustering in the Mbizana area, and then it kind of does spread out a little as the roads, as we travel down the road. So here's some examples of the subsistence agriculture. Here, obviously sheep. Here you've got a whole lot of like millies stored on the roof of the house, and you've got areas that are cleared and kind of used in plantation kind of settings as well. And if we just look at the agriculture, and then we'll move into the other enterprises. 216 recordings, 149 crops, as I said, sheep, cows, goats, horses, pigs, chickens, donkeys, horses, okay, a few of the smaller kind of things that we found as well. If you look at the agriculture activities, no real surprises. Okay, in the town of Mbizana, not so much. But these are kind of in household gardens and like literally within the town. Then as you move along the kind of the transect, you see that a lot of the agriculture is actually spread kind of further away from the CBD of the metro, what we call it metropolitan, but of the CBD of the small town. If we look at non-agriculture, the number of enterprises was 112. And the most predominant businesses were spaza shops and street traders. And we're taking into all the different street traders into this account, the businesses that are selling food or drink in particular, fruit and veg, kind of anything that falls in the food and drink category. This is the key micro-enterprise type that you see within that locality. And the products sold by those street traders varied wisely, from clothes to honey, electronics to sausages. We found like people literally walking up and down the side of the R61 selling pieces of honeycomb that extracted out of like wild harvested hives on the side of the road. So there were some really interesting kind of different examples of the kinds of businesses that were there. And this is the different kinds of businesses. So once again in Mbizana we've taken a kind of an excerpt here. You can see a lot of clustering of like informal businesses within the CBD of Mbizana itself. Which shows the power of the kind of the economy within that town landscape as opposed to what you're seeing in the deeper rural areas. Just to give a context, this is Ivory Park, where we've done a lot of work historically within Johannesburg. Now there's 1,600 micro-enterprises within this like kind of 1.5 by 2 kilometre kind of area. And what you can see here is like there's little clusterings of like enterprises along what are busier roads. So if you kind of flash this back to the enterprises you see in Mbizana, okay, the criticality of high streets for informal businesses is really, really clear. And the fact that you need human pedestrian traffic brings about a lot of opportunity for businesses to be able to kind of set up and exist. So this is the potential for your informal economy in terms of the activities that could be going on and the scale of the activities that we could be seeing. Okay, but if we go back to Mbizana, basically looking at the demographics, okay, 60% of the South Africans who are running informal businesses were females, but conversely, where we found non-South Africans, 90% were males, which speaks quite well to the kind of the migration literature. It's young men who tend to leave their home countries. I was young when I left my home country, and go to new countries and become entrepreneurs and do these kinds of things. If you look at the nationality, about 90% of the enterprises we came across were run by South Africans, which compared to a lot of the urban townships we're finding is actually quite a high percentage. We are seeing a little bit of penetration of Ethiopians, Somalis, Pakistanis in particular, all concentrated within the grocery sector. And this is not unusual in the broader context of South Africa. The modalities of trade, okay, half of your businesses are trading from the street. And of course in the transit where you're going along the street, there's a sense of like, well, of course they're the businesses we're going to find. So there's certainly potentially a little bit of bias in that finding, but at the same time, as we know, the high streets are critical places for informal businesses to cluster. So it is certainly a key way of operating. 28% from dedicated buildings. So these were buildings that were specifically set up to run a business. So your taverns and your spaza shops, for example, the spaza shop might be in a container, your tavern would be in a dedicated structure, as opposed to running from the home. 16% of businesses work from the home, which ironically is quite low for most informal economy activities. In the urban township context, the home is a critical place for running an enterprise. Just some images, some examples. So the blessing shop, this is a kind of typical spaza shop environment, mobile, fruit and veg, street trading kind of context as well. The average business profits, okay, I would be very, very cautious about interpreting these figures too broadly. 274 rands per day, which when you consider the income levels within the broader context, the informal economy is providing a very strong level of financial support for the individuals who run those businesses. 274 rands in that community, in that scale of poverty, is a significant kind of contribution to the household. But I would suggest that whilst the income from these businesses is relatively low, I think 274 rands is not that much money, it is making an important contribution. What one mustn't look at is like the per month figure is difficult because a lot of businesses aren't running 5 days a week or 6 days a week. A lot of enterprises are open. For example, if you're buying on the side of the road, your key times of business are Thursday evening, Friday evening, Saturday afternoon, evening, and then maybe Sunday. And a lot of those businesses as well are operated not just for the income, but they're also operated for the livelihood circumstance of the individual behind them. So more than 70% of people who braai on the side of the road, for example, are women with dependent children. So as a woman with a dependent child, okay, you don't want to be necessarily doing a job in town where you are like putting your children into childcare, catching taxis every day and incurring those costs and not able to fulfill your role as a parent. Whereas braaiing allows you to be at home with your children during the day, allows you to have your partner or your family come home at the end of the day and take charge of the children while you go out and operate your business. So there's a lot of logical steps as to why some of these businesses operate the way they do. But what we did see as well is the income from micro enterprises in Mbizana Municipality is often supported by social grants and other business activities, and supplemented by subsistence agriculture. Okay, but in some cases we also saw that the incomes are just simply insufficient. People are just not earning enough money at all. If you look at this, okay, this is a map of like the motivations of why people got into the enterprises they got into. And 88% of people said, I got into this business because there's nothing else for me to do. So we really are talking about a context of survival. And this is almost the inverse of what we find in a lot of the urban township contexts. In the urban township, people are like, I'm here to make money. This is my business. I started this because I have an orientation which was allowing me to be able to do this. In this context, it's like only 12% of people would have defined themselves as entrepreneurs. The remainder are saying, look, this is what I have to do. Income sustainability, only 29% of respondents in micro enterprises indicated they could sustain themselves from their businesses. Okay, so nearly a third of the businesses are able to kind of make enough money to get by without anything else. Realistically, 20 of the 48 respondents who said that the income wasn't enough were able to generate income to sustain themselves. Okay, so more than half the respondents aren't earning enough money. Regardless of whether they run a business or not, they're literally not able to get enough money in a given month to get by on a regular basis. So the criticality of the informal enterprise is really, really important because it's allowing people to bring extra money in where they otherwise wouldn't get it. Of those who had extra income, 25% of them relying on social grants. So the role of the social grant within these rural communities is also very, very critical. And when you add together the informal business, the social grants, the possibility that someone else in the household may have a job, and you put that into a household context, okay, it's only through those multiple income strategies do you start to see how households survive on a month-to-month basis. But each piece of the puzzle is not enough on its own to contribute to the survival of the local economy. So reported alternative income sources, social grants 25% of people, other work 24% of people, other, which was kind of non-specified 15%, and then but unknown or none, okay, 34% of people. So a lot of people, there are real issues around where their money comes from. When we go to the municipality, 41% of the respondents describe their interaction with the municipality as good, which is like relatively high in the context of what Al's been describing to you, and only 14% describe the interaction as bad. However, if you dig into the good and the bad, and you understand, well, where are people coming from when they're discussing like where their perception of the municipality is, people's expectations of the municipality are so incredibly low. For a lot of people, like, all I want the municipality to do is leave me alone. And if they leave me alone, that's good. So the municipality is good, okay? Of course, if you want electricity, if you want water, if you want other basic services, if you don't want law enforcement to come around and harass you, okay, then all of a sudden your expectations may change. And so what was very interesting is that people's responses were things like, the municipality do nothing bad to me, or they don't give me any problems. Okay, so the expectation of the municipality to do bad things to you seems to be quite strong. And if we actually dig through the municipality and we look at its 6 goals, now on its website they've got these 6 goals: investing in its people's poverty fight, providing affordable services, facilitating a people-driven economy, providing sustainable communities, protecting and preserving the environment, and strengthening a culture of performance and public participation. When we drill down into each of these particular kind of objectives or goals, okay, what is very clear, the middle row here, dissatisfied. Investing in the poverty fight, 64% unhappy. 65% providing affordable services, unhappy. People-driven economy, 66% unhappy. Building sustainable communities, 63% unhappy. Protecting the environment, 65% unhappy. Performance and participation, 64% unhappy. And then you've got room for improvements as well. So the challenge lies when you talk to informal business operators within this context, that they are, when you dig into the detail, people are not particularly happy with where things are going in terms of local governance. And it's very clear when you start to actually dig into the kind of the details of people's lives and the nitty-gritty of their world, the municipality is playing a really important role for them, but it's not playing the right role because people are not getting the things that they're expecting. So if I just draw some conclusions, my last slide. Informal business in Mbizana operates mostly at a subsistence level. Business profits outside of agriculture average around 2,000 rands a month, but I'd be very cautious to say that that's necessarily like a uniform number or it's necessarily a regular number. I think it's highly variable. Subsistence agriculture is absolutely critical to bolster livelihoods. Businesses are concentrated around the town centre, with activities centred around subsistence agriculture spreading away from the town sector, and it does show an important role for the subsistence sector with respect to agriculture. Most micro-enterprises are run by South Africans and have very few or no employees, okay, so which does point to a survivalist economy. Only 32% of respondents are able to sustain themselves from the income that comes from their business profits, and the others rely on social grants, subsistence agriculture, or other kind of economic activities. But the majority of people are experiencing insufficient economic resources to get by. And while the overwhelming literal interaction with municipalities is reported to be good, okay, most people are dissatisfied with the municipality's performance when it comes to achieving the goals that the municipality has set itself to achieve. And I think that there is definitely a need for a longer-term quality of engagements on some of these matters, because I think just from this very kind of quick drop into the pool, okay, the insights that we've been able to collect and to be able to understand have shown us that it's a complex relationship within the informal economy and local government. And the local government does play a very important role for the informal economy.